Baltimore and all week long. And we have another defending champion and repeat visitor here. And Albert Breer joins us, senior reporter from the MMQB and formerly of a lot of different places, but covering the league better than anybody. You know, Super Bowl week, of all the things we could discuss here, John Lynch becoming an executive, I think is one of the more fascinating pieces of the whole thing when you consider the Browns hired a bunch of baseball guys. And, you know, Elway has a track record on this, and Ozzie obviously in Baltimore, but there was something about, like, holding the clipboard, going into meetings, being a junior scout and a senior scout and a position coach. This is an amazing thing for the 49ers, especially on a 6-year deal, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about organizational alignment, and we've seen it go the wrong way in so many different places. Buffalo, Los Angeles, San Francisco,
maybe Indianapolis. There you go, right.
I mean, it's been everywhere where you've, you know, just like not having an organization aligned has cost teams in a very big way. And so I think the fact that Kyle has a relationship with John Lynch really helps. You know, I think that they feel like they need a lot of the same things, say, the Broncos needed in 2011 when they hired John Elway. And remember, that was coming off of the quote-unquote Spygate 2 with Josh McDaniels. They feel like they need a tone setter. And so I think John Lynch checks a lot of the boxes as far as what they were looking for in a guy to lead that side of the building. The problem is, of course, that he doesn't have experience doing it. And so that makes the next wave of hires really, really important. You know, when Elway got to Denver, he had Brian Sanders, who'd been the GM there. He had Matt Russell there, who has become his right-hand man now. You see Elway, now you see Russell.
But he also knew secretaries. He also knew people. He also knew sponsors. He knew Denver. I think that's the most backwards thing, is I don't even know if he knows where the office is at this point, and everything becomes new there for what, the fourth time in 9 years, 8 years, whatever it's been, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, like I think the Niners knew, and again, the 6-year deal comes up a lot. They offered 6 years to Josh McDaniels too, and you know, part of it was that, you know, that's the price that they had to pay for firing 3 coaches in a row. Or firing coaches 3 years in a row. The biggest question any coach or any, you know, personnel guy is going to have going in there is, are you going to pull the plug on me after 2 years? And so to counteract that, they had to offer years to coaches, to GMs, and there had to be an acknowledgement there that we're going to give you time, because it's basically an expansion team now. Now, that's what was attractive about it to Josh, who, you know, made it clear from the beginning. I think after the first few days of the process, like, he preferred San Francisco over Los Angeles and over Jacksonville, because he's going to get to pick his own quarterback. He was going to, in essence, pick his own GM.
Right.
You know, there weren't bad contracts there. There wasn't like an existing core there. He was going to be able to build it from the ground up. The flip side of that is the acknowledgement that it is basically like an expansion team means that you have to give that person that you're trusting to rebuild the organization time to do it. And if I'm Josh McDaniels or Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch, the only way that they can really assure me that they're all in on me is to financially invest in me, which they've obviously done in both guys.
Albert Breer joining us here from the MMQB. And conversely, over your shoulder is, yet again, Tom Brady on a Super Bowl poster. And these organizations that can't figure it out. And then the organizations like we have in Baltimore, or even in Pittsburgh, or even Indianapolis, where they have figured it out in the past, and they at least have that. Then there's this thing that everyone is measured upon. And, you know, I've said all week long, what are they doing to cheat this year? Because that's how I feel about the Patriots. But I know you're closer to the situation than that. And you know, no one's been around the team more than you, but this still stands as shocking to anyone, I think, that's watched modern sports, that this is possible from a 39-year-old quarterback and, by and large, a bunch of players that, you know, nice players, but – I mean, Brady's had 2 decades now. How many Hall of Famers does he have besides him?
I mean, Brady's enabled so much of what they've done. I mean, he basically enables Bill's coaching style because, I mean, look, Brady can go in, or Belichick can go in there and he can MF Tom Brady. If you're any other player in that roster, you look at that and you're like, okay, that can happen to anybody now. Like, I've got to accept this coaching style because the greatest quarterback of all time is accepting that coaching style. Enabled them to build
his wife
to build the roster.
Dating supermodels. Right. I mean, literally, right?
And they've been able to they've been able to build the roster a certain way because of Brady. They've been able to take risks because of Brady. Who else can trade I mean, go back a year, right? And if we were sitting here 1 year ago today, and you had to name the 6 most important Patriots, Rob Gronkowski would have been on that list. Now, obviously, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do any more to really prevent the injury that he had. But then Jamie Collins and Chandler Jones would have been on that list too, and those guys were traded away. So 3 of the 6 most important players from a year ago are gone, and they're in the Super Bowl. And
easily, almost.
The only reason, but the reason that you can do that, if you're Bill Belichick, is because I've got the ultimate job security, not only because I've won, but because I know no matter what, Tom Brady's going to get us to 11 or 12 wins. It almost doesn't matter what we put around him. And so he can send a message to the defense by trading Jamie Collins. You want to start freelancing? You want to play outside the defense? You want to focus on your contract instead of the team? You're out of here. And you know what the result is I mean, of all the Patriot teams I've seen, this might be the most disciplined team on defense. It might be the best tackling team on defense. You don't see coverage busts.
Right.
Like, the message was received. No other coach can trade somebody like Jamie Collins in the middle of the season for a third-round pick because the risk is you lose your job.
Sure.
But because you've got Brady, I'm going to get to 12 or 13 wins no matter what. This is a worthwhile risk for me because we're not doing things the right way with him in there, and maybe this will send a message to the rest of the team, and it worked. No one else can do that. And that's the power of having Tom Brady on your roster.
Well, Albert, I got to ask you about the annual story. Eric DeCosta, you reported recently Indianapolis had interest in interviewing him. They released their 6 candidates. He was not on that list. They hire Chris Ballard.
Yep.
I took that, and Nestor and I know Eric. We know this situation there. He's the heir apparent. Steve Bisciotti's made that very clear. But when you look at where the Ravens are, they've missed the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. Indy, a franchise quarterback in Andrew Luck, unlike that situation in San Francisco that you just spoke about.
A coach you can get along with.
And a coach that he is familiar with, had a relationship with, Chuck Pagano, of course, in Baltimore. I took it as him once again.
He's never
we've said it we've wondered so long.
Yeah.
Will there be a point where he doesn't wait anymore? But this seemed as good as a situation could be to potentially pursue it, at least be interested.
My feeling on it is part of the equation for Eric would be the city and the franchise too. And that's why I think Chicago intrigued him. That's why I think if the Giants ever came open, that would intrigue him.
Something that's stable.
Well, it's not. It's a hit. Well, the Bears certainly aren't stable,
right.
But the idea of going to a big market, a place that's a good place to live, that has a iconic franchise.
Right.
There are lots of elements here, and I think literally, a lot of people say it would take the perfect situation for me to leave. I think Eric really means it.
Well, for Kubiak, there was only one situation he was going to take.
Right.
So, right?
Right. Well, no, Kubiak could come. I mean, you guys know this. Kubiak could come to, I mean, credit to him for, recognizing what was in front of him, that the opportunity that was in front of him. But he'd very much come to a comfort level with, I could just be an assistant forever.
Yeah.
I'm fine with this. I like this job. I just get to go in and coach ball. I don't deal with all the stuff that goes along with being a head coach. I'm fine with this. And then Denver came knocking. I think he would have been happy being John Harbaugh's offensive coordinator for 10 years.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
That was the one job.
Yeah, I think it was okay. It's like the old Bear Bryant thing, Mama called. Like that's what it was,
right.
And so he goes and wins the Super Bowl, and now, I mean, it's the same thing, with Eric. I think it would just take everything. I think it would just take everything lining up, and he's got family in Baltimore and everything else. It would just take an incredible situation for him to walk away. I understand what you're saying about them having missed the playoffs 3 or 4 years.
Well, the question would be if anything goes wrong, and a lot's going to have to go right for them to win 11 or 12 games next year, right? I mean, if anything doesn't go right, when you consider Zach Orr now, you got Wagner out on the marketplace, Brandon Williams, all those things that make an off season. If they go 8-8 next year, then what happens to Ozzie, to Eric, to John, to Flacco if he's complicit in them stinking next year? I don't know that we've ever had this sort of offseason in Baltimore because we've never. I've done sports radio 25 years. We have never had this sort of dangle. I mean, Billick wasn't dangled. He had 4 years left on the contract, and part of the reason he got fired was being, hey, that Belichick thing. I'm not going anywhere. You guys have to listen to me. I have a contract. That was part of Brian's hammer back in 2007, and obviously it was taken away pretty quickly. Bisciotti's saying the pitchforks were out. I get that from the fans and the media, but 4 out of 5 years, I don't know that the most stable organization is going to remain stable.
I guess that's why I've made the point, or at least just my opinion as an outsider looking at it, being around the team, certainly. But if things were as dire as the fans portray it inside the building, if Steve Bisciotti really was that much on edge and that unhappy, that's where I would have thought, would Eric DeCosta take an interview at least? And that's where I just wonder.
I think you have to consider too how it wouldn't be easy to deconstruct everything there,
right?
Because there's so many people that have been there for such a long time, and it's not just the GM and the coach
and competent people,
it's
people that are
competent.
Let's
go down the list. I mean, you have Ozzie at the top, right? But then you have Eric, you have
Pat.
Vince Newsom. You have Pat Moriarty,
Joe
you
Ortiz.
have Dick Cass, you have Joe Ortiz, you have George Kokinis.
Right.
It's like if you look at the level of stability in that organization, it wouldn't be the same as going in somewhere else and saying, okay, we're going to hire, we're going to have a new GM in January, and then he's going to bring in all the scouts after the draft.
We don't do that in Baltimore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And we don't talk about it much. This is the first time I've ever sat on a radio row and talked about it.
But there's great value in having all of that, and there's great value in having what Baltimore has, and I think Bisciotti recognizes that.
Sure.
Right. Now, I mean, there are fair questions to ask when you've cycled through as many offensive coordinators as you have, and I can understand it if, look, I'm always of the idea that you should hire people who you're going to lose.
Right.
Because you want to hire people who you're going to lose.
Hire the best person.
They're going to do a good job. And
it's the reason I know half the people in the league because they went through Baltimore. They all scattered.
But on offense, that hasn't been what's happened. So that's something clearly, I think and it's got to be frustrating for the personnel department. Okay, we'd like to have an offense in place that's kind of part of our identity and that we feel like we can kind of wrap our arms around and build, and they haven't had that. So I think that's the question that they have to answer, where they've been so stable everywhere else, even on the defensive side of the ball with Dean Pease and Jerry Rosberg on special teams. They've been so stable everywhere else. I think the bigger question is what do you why has it gone so sideways on offense where you've cycled through all of these offensive coordinators? Again, not all. Gary left for a head coaching job, so it wasn't all because
Jim
the
Caldwell left for Detroit, although there were some
it's
questions about him.
It's not like it's not like it was all because the offense fell flat on its face. But when you've got as stable an organization as the Ravens have had, and there's one part of that organization that hasn't worked the same way, and that certainly merits some examination.
Albert Breer joining us here from the MMQB. He is a senior reporter there, and Atlanta Falcons. No one's given them a whole lot of juice here this year, and I guess this week is a week we're going to learn more about them and about whether they're going to be champions. Matt Ryan, Boston guy, and there's all sorts of ties here with Pioli and Dimitroff through Belichick, and I watched the old NFL Network piece the other day. But the Falcons have been quiet. This is their week to slay the giant. Thoughts about them winning?
Yeah, I think on offense they're certainly championship ready. This is the first time Kyle Shanahan's been a offensive coordinator in the NFL for 9 years now. This is the first time he's had every element to make the offense work at the highest level. And not only that, he's not going to be stubborn against New England. New England's going to make you play left-handed. That's what they do defensively. And they don't mind. Atlanta doesn't mind playing left-handed. So they're versatile enough to do it.
Julio Jones doesn't have to catch 12 balls in this game to win.
Right. Like they can win different ways. They played great the 2 games that Julio wasn't in there. So, offensively, they're ready to compete. And I think that's why this is going to be a shootout. Defensively, they've come a long way, but they're still a year or two away.
Sure.
They're starting a lot of young guys. Deion Jones, Devontae Campbell. Keanu O'Neal, Vic Beasley. There are a lot of young guys they're relying on. And so I think defensively they're still a year or two away. And, history tells you that there's a good chance they're going to have to get a stop in the fourth quarter against Tom Brady. And I just don't know if they're capable of that. But offensively, I think they'll be able to. I think this is going to be a legitimate shootout. This game doesn't have the sizzle or the storylines that if the Packers would have had if they were here, or the Cow. But I think it's going to be a better game, if that makes sense. It just doesn't have the same I mean, you guys know, and you'll be dealing with this. Atlanta just doesn't have the same sort of bite that Dallas or Green Bay
Of
will.
course, yeah, from a fan standpoint, for the city, for all of that.
Yeah.
Albert Breer joining us here. All right, last thing, you're a Boston guy here. Are they bored with this? I mean, you talk about coming down here. I don't know what Patriot fan hasn't been to a Super Bowl at this point.
I think it's 2 years ago. I think that would have been a fair question before Deflategate. Like when they beat the Ravens in the when they beat the Ravens in the playoffs.
When they cheated that day, you mean? They beat the right that one,
the
right?
formations and stuff.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
No, I think that one was that was. I mean, they hadn't won a championship in 10 years, so that was part of it. But I think that there was. I think complacency is probably the right word. That the fan base didn't have the same edge. And you guys, I mean, I don't know if you guys have been to Gillette, but it's
many times.
It's a wine and cheese crowd, and so I think that there was a complacency a couple of years ago. Deflategate changed that completely. Yeah. Now there's edge, there's anger, and I'm just telling you, living there. I think even more so than looking forward to the game, people are looking forward to after the game. If they win, and Roger having to handle Lombardi to Kraft on Sunday night, and then on Monday morning, right here in this building, having to stand up there alone on a podium with Tom Brady and hand him the MVP. So I think that's what that's given. I think that's given the fan base something. Just like a different edge that I don't think had been there in a long, long time, and now clearly exists.
How do you, in your mind, justify it? I mean, you did as much reporting. You're close to them. I mean, it's almost like the political landscape now, where you read all this stuff, and there's the left and the right in the middle. There's in town and out of town. Right. There are sympathizers and criticizers of Deflategate, and I make fun of it at this point. I do find it fascinating that most of the people I know in the league think that they're doing something nefarious up there all the time, whether it's bugging the locker room, stuff that's just outside the lines of, and Belichick confusing the officials, as you pointed out a couple of years ago. There's something about Belichick that
they created this situation for themselves in 2007. Yeah, that's the bottom line. I use the example of Pete Carroll, where after the Reggie Bush thing, Pete Carroll couldn't be caught having lunch with a recruit. You know what I mean? It just couldn't. He made that bed for himself. And the Patriots made that bed for themselves, where they were going to be watched closer. Now, you can argue about the impact of the infraction and what it had on wins and losses and
how long they've been cheating?
In the first 8 years, in the first 8 years Belichick was there. But clearly, they were warned. They ignored the warning. They went forward. And they blatantly broke the rules. So it was always going at that point, you pay the price, but you also, you create a situation for yourself where we're going to be watched closer, and we don't operate under the same circumstances as everybody else. And so, I think that was a huge part of Deflategate, which was again, they made their bet on that. They made their own bet on that one in 2007, and. It certainly, if you look at the text messages, it certainly looks like something happened. You know what I mean? But there was a complete overreach on the penalties, and so that part of it, I think, is what made a lot of people in New England angry.
But when you're already on double secret probation,
right, and
that's where the penalty comes, right?
Yeah,
repeat offender.
That's what it was. So we could argue about that until the cows come home. I can understand the league coming down on the team. To do what they did to Brady was, look, he wasn't part of Spygate. He had a squeaky clean reputation.
He even had a white sweater, as I remember.
At that point, 15 years. He played 15 years in the league, and for them to go after him the way that they went after him, I think that's what pushed a lot of people in Boston into defense mode, because Tom Brady is Larry Bird now. He is Ted Williams. He is Bill Russell. He is Bobby Orr in Boston. That's what Tom Brady is now. It'd be like somebody going after Cal Ripken in Baltimore. And it will be. It's that.
And Cal really wanted the squeaky clean image because he wanted to be considered amongst the greatest of all time, right? And I guess with Brady, we're now at this position where you can make an Elway argument or a Unitas argument or a Montana argument, but It's getting especially in the modern era, especially in the modern era with Sauerkraut. The fact that they've done this and it's 39 years of age.
I think the argument's over.
You think he's the greatest player of all time?
Greatest player of all time.
Above Jim Brown, above all of that.
At least post-merger.
I think he's the greatest player. Now, I didn't watch freaking Autogram, all right? But I mean, as far as like the guys that I feel like you can actually make a comparison against, and look, my dad will tell me until I'm 50 years old that Jim Brown's the greatest player of all time because Jim Brown was so physically dominant over everybody else. I just know this, like the impact that he's had on his team over the last 17 years is immeasurable. It's just changed every level of that organization. It's changed the way that they manage their finances. It's changed the way that they manage player acquisitions. It's changed the way that they're able to coach. Bill Belichick can't, like a young Bill Belichick guy who coaches that way, like there are probably 25 teams in the NFL where that just wouldn't work because athletes don't respond to that anymore. And because they have, for the reasons I explained earlier, like
leverage.
I mean, it's like if you can treat Tom Brady that way, then you can treat anybody that way. It's just like he has impacted that organization on every single level. It is just, and you can count it up, but like that's why I think, to me, like the argument's over. Like, and if he wins this one, then there's more distance there,
sure.
But I think it's over. I'm like, and I would have told you, like, I wrote 4 years ago that I thought he was, like, had a very real argument. That was 4 years ago, a very real argument for being the greatest of all time. Since then, he's been to 4 AFC championship games and 2 Super Bowls, and may win 2 Super Bowls.
After 35.
He won 3 Super Bowls in his 20s, and now he's been to the AFC Championship game in every year in each of the last 6 years of his 30s. Think about that. Each of the last 6 years of his 30s, he led one of the last 4 teams standing. This is the 3rd time he's been to the Super Bowl in that span. It's bonkers. You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it'll never happen again. Yeah. Albert Breer joining us here, senior reporter at the MMQB. They're going to win?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think it's going to be a shootout. I think in the end, the difference is I don't think Atlanta will be able to get the stop they need to get in the fourth quarter. So I think I've been saying, I don't know. I mean, everybody asked me. I think I said 34-31, something like that.
Love having you on, man.
All right,
thanks for coming by.
Thank you,
Albert
Nestor.
Breer here from the MMQB, along with Luke Jones. You can find us out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere you are. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. If there's any breaking news, and Luke's over here monitoring it right now, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready. We are live at Super Bowl 51 in Houston, Texas. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.